Now I can share the screen again. Okay. Control L. Well, at the end, the last of the tutorings today. Thank you everybody for being here. Today we've got lots of slides, but actually most of them are about projects. So we're going to have a first part that is more about methodologies. The second one is about project that explains. Everything is divided into chapters. And now we're going to see what you are going to listen to. So, first of all, let's talk about truth. What do we mean by truth? When working in an archaeological context, the main theme is the recognition of the measurement of the distance that exists between what is seen and what is not seen, that is, between the visible ruin and its original absent state. So the point here is pretty clear. When we're going to work with archaeology, the main important topic is to understand the distance that exists between the original architecture that through the centuries became archaeology. And in that wandering moment, in that fantastic moment of creation of your minds, the project appears. Here you can see a modeling of a temple, of a Corinthian temple from Greece. And this is something that we can't appreciate any longer because we don't have any temple that well conserved. But what we knew about the construction of the temples gave us the chance to reproduce one of them, how they used to appear. Because the point is to establish what is the truth, what is the real moment that has to be redesigned. For example, probably you don't know this building. This building is in Rome. It faces the Roman Forum, and it is a temple, basically. The temple is from the second century after Christ. But in the 17th century, they decided to build a church inside the temple itself, using the naos, the inner cell of the temple, as the space for the church. So, what is the truth? The truth is the temple, the Greek temple, the Roman temple, or the truth is the church, or the truth is the inner temple with the church. Nonetheless, you have to consider that this building actually was buried by a very thick layer of ground, because with the flood of the Tiber River, the Tevere, the level of the city raised. So even the temple was not at the original height. It was when in the 2nd century after Christ. So what is the truth? The truth is the original position of the temple in the 2nd century. The truth is the temple with the raised level of the city. The truth is the temple with the church inside. What should we look for? What is the moment that we have to record? Because, you know, when we get to restore something, it's always a matter of choices. Someone could say that to restore this building, we should have destroyed the church inside. But probably the main value of this building is the fact that a temple contains a church that is 1,500 years younger. So why to destroy these overlapping of layers and years and centuries? And is it correct to regain the original level of the Roman period? Or should we have kept the level of the city nowadays? Those are questions. The questions that an architect, a designer, a museographic designer need to keep in consideration, being aware that there's not a unique answer to those kind of questions, but it's always a matter of choice. The choice you have to do to decide what to keep and what not to keep, which level to gain, which level to forget. But we are helped in that by paradigms. So by those examples that through the centuries taught us the idea of what it could be done. For example, if you look at this building, probably you know this building, this is the Colosseum, obviously. You can see, or maybe you already know, that part of it, and if you can see my little cursor, this part has been rebuilt in the 18th century by Raffaello Stern. This is not original. It was needed because of the fact that this part of the Colosseum were collapsing, while this way it can stand strongly over there, and it also give even a further invitation to redesign the space. And even part of the rest of the Colosseum has been restored in the 20th century. Look at that one. Here you can clearly see what was ruined and what is the restoration because of the material, because of the accuracy of the detailing. Here you can see on the right part the original Colosseum, and on the left one the Colosseum reconstructed. In this way, they also decided to suggest how the Colosseum used to appear, just designing, reproducing a little part of the vault that used to cover this area. Actually, we're talking about this moment. Here you can see the beginning of a vault that was connecting this level with this level. And this is a choice. The restorer decided that this way is not too offending the building too much, and is enough to show the people how the Colosseum used to be. We can say the same about this arch, the Arch of Titus. Here you can see the actual solution. And at the first glance, it could look like being basically complete. But if we get closer, we can see exactly the moment where the building has been restored and where the building is the original one. You can see that in any peculiarities, in any characteristic, the designer decided to get a kind of reductions of the ornaments, of the detailing. He decided to look for that kind of reduction that was enough to explain the overall architecture without faking or without pretending that the building was exactly like the original. So we have always this element deciding what was new and what was old. But after all, if you look at the complete building, you can still appreciate an entirety of the entire building. If we go further, and if we enter into this kind of restoration that is in Verona, it's all about the restoration of the castle of Castelvecchio in Verona. And this restoration is defined by the architect Carlo Scarpa. You can see here which building I'm talking about. This is the castle in the pretty center of Verona in Veneto. If you have time to go there and have a trip, please don't hesitate, because it's very worth of that. And this project actually lasted more than 20 years. And insisted in a building that was already restored in the beginning of the 20th century, in 1920. So after 50 years after the first restoration in 1920, in 1970, Carlo Scarpa defined this kind of restoration. How he did it? What he decided to keep? Basically, Carlo Scarpa produced a critic intervention. In fact, he decided not only to re-establish the overall volumetric appearing of the castle from the 13th century, but also keeping some of the restored part from the beginning of the 20th century, but emphasizing that those elements were fake and misunderstood by a new intervention is one that is not going to reproduce exactly the castle as it was, but just giving a contemporary appearing and very explicit one, but also working in contrast with the restoration of the 20th of the last century. Here you can see very clearly how even the floor is layered with 3 different layers, emphasizing and showing the layer of the castle from the 13th century, the layer of the first restoration from the beginning of the 20th century, and the layer from Carlo Scarpa in the second half of the 20th century. And to show you even better, for example, if you look at those windows that are from the first restoration in the beginning of the 20th century, and it is incorrect because these kind of windows were not typical of the original castle, so the first restoration was incorrect. To emphasize his distance from this restoration, the windows that Carlo Scarpa designed just behind them are working in contrast with the windows of the first restoration. And all the elements works this way. You can see here, you can see how even the museographic approach, museographic layer is very strong and very evident all over. And this is part of the architectonic design. Here you can see that opening, that aporia that exists between the castle and the other part of the building itself, that has been completely redesigned by Carlo Scarpa, emphasizing this as a unique and also as something that doesn't want to be misunderstood, doesn't want to misguide the visitor. Nobody could be misguided or could believe that this building, this part of the building is from the 13th century. It's obvious that this building, this part is a contemporary one, but at the same time emphasize in a museographic sense the quality of the building itself. Here you can see the interior, for example, and you can see what I told you about the windows working in contrast with the windows of the first restoration. And even the pavements, if you look at the pavements from Carlo Scarpa, you can see that all the pavements leave a very strong and evident string of respect to the ancient and original walls. So all the pavements stop before touching the original wall, just declaring that they are another layer, that is something new that could be appreciated and understood by the visitors. And here, despite everything is about restoration, anything can be misunderstood. Everything is clear. On the other hand, there are other typical ideas of how a project could work. Here we are in Spain. Probably some of you can recognize the city of Mérida in Spain, a city with a Roman foundings. And you can see here in the first row the amphitheater and the theater. But what we are going to speak about is not one of those that has been restored afterwards, but it's about this big building on the top right. In fact, this is a museum that has been built during the late years of the 80s of the last century, a project by Rafael Moneo. During the excavation, they found a Roman layer underneath the level of the actual streets. And so they decided to musealize them, creating a new museum. What did Rafael Moneo do? Rafael Moneo decided to recreate a building, a contemporary building, with all the characteristics and peculiarities from the ideal point of view of a Roman building, but in a contemporary way. And not only, not to be misunderstood, he decided that he wanted to orient his new building on a different direction than the direction of the Roman layer. From this map, you can clearly understand what the Roman layer was and what the new layer of the building is. Here you can see the orthogonality of the new building and even instead the diagonal orientation of the Roman layer. In this way, he recreated a building that is explicitly modern, is explicitly contemporary, but at the same time, it keeps in itself all the property of the Roman idea of architecture. So mass, volumetry, even the materiality, these bricks, but even the bricks are in a proportion that is not used for the Roman bricks. So it is declared that those bricks are contemporary. And if you go underneath, you can even see how the new building, still with those massive arches defining the spaces, so giving this sense of Romanity very strongly, are not aligned with the Roman layer. So in this way, Rafael Moneo produced a contemporary building by keeping the Roman attitude. Here you can see the quality of the space and even how the light characterize the environment. Then let's go to one of the masterpieces for our matter. That is the intervention led by Giorgio Grassi and Manuel Portaselli in the theater of Sagunto. This is a very controversial project that has been debated and fighted a lot through the centuries. Basically, this is the final appearance. The story is pretty known, actually. There were this theater in Sagunto that were restored mainly in the 19th century, that in the end of the last century, so 40 years ago, was decided to restore again by the hand of and the ideas of Giorgio Grassi. Giorgio Grassi decided to have a very peculiar attitude. He produced a new project that wanted to represent how an original Roman theater used to appear by the architectonic point of view. So he reproduced exactly the volumetry, the masses, and the idea of the impact of this building in the city without using any kind of decoration and any kind of other elements that could be misunderstood as ancient. So, as you clearly understand, this building is evidently contemporary, but it is exactly designed under the proportion led by the typology of the Roman theater. Here you can see some phases of construction and how the new intervention interact with the ruins. Here you can see this incredible section and how the reconstruction of the scene that is exactly as high as the maximum element of the cavea of the seats. That is exactly how the Roman used to design their theaters. And here you can see this is a brand new part, but even the seats are reproduced and they are explicitly new, but exactly retracing the original position and dimension of the seats during the Roman period. The only element that has been kept just to show the proportion of the original architecture is this column that is being recomposed by anastylosis over here, just to show the presence of the three orders in this theater. For the rest, you can appreciate the way the new architecture, still retracing the original dimension and proportion of the theater, fits with the presence of the ruins over here. Here you can see better. If you go now in Sagunto, that is a city pretty close to Valencia in Spain, you can access this theater that actually is a museum showing how a theater should have appeared to a Roman people during the Roman period. So now we have the chance of appreciate this kind of volumetric appearance that otherwise we could have not, because you can leave the space of the theater, you can walk the space of the theater. At the same time, you can't misunderstand what is new and what is old. And being a didactic museum, so a museum to show how a theater used to be, it is also a theater, and it is used for its original purpose, that is being a theater. So there's a theatrical season every summer in Sagunto, very well attended. One of the topics I told you about is the topic of reversibility of the project. You need to keep in consideration once you get to work in archaeological site, in archaeological environments. In fact, as I told you, your projects are supposed to be reversible, removable. And once you remove them, they should not leave any traces of their former presence. But if you look at this building, something in your opinion could be opened. This is the temple of Athena Nike in Athens on the Acropolis. On the left side, you can see the temple. On the right side, you can see the same place without the temple. In fact, despite its heaviness, its massivity, and its hardness due to the materials and to the masses of the buildings, for example, the Greek architecture, mainly the Greek architecture, was a kind of removable building. In fact, everything is composed by blocks. They are leaning one on each other like a kind of a Lego construction. And in this case, a kind of 20 years ago, this building has been completely disassembled to be restored in somewhere else. And after the restoration of the single pieces, has been remounted on the same place. Now, if you go there, you can see the temple completed and restored, insisting on the same place, and with all the original pieces at the same space, in the same places. Here you can see the enlargement of the element below. And we can say the same even about the Parthenon. And here other consideration can come to life. If you look at this image, it's an image from the 18th century, 19th century. And you can see how the Parthenon was just a part of a small neighborhood that were installed on the top of the Acropolis. So houses, even a little pond in the middle of the garden of the house, trees, and nonetheless, one little mosque inside the Parthenon itself. So it was a living neighborhood where the Parthenon was just part of the city life. Yes, in this case, somebody needed to decide which was the layer to be kept. And so he took the responsibility to destroy all the layers he didn't want to. But this is a choice. Again, is the presence of the houses less true than the presence of the Parthenon? Or even if we want to consider to destroy all the houses, should the little mosque be destroyed just to keep only the entirety and purity of the Parthenon? At the end of the day, we saw in the beginning that temple in Rome with a church inside, and we are happy that they kept the church inside the temple. Why we are not happy of having a mosque inside the Parthenon? There are lots of reasons that could be understood about that, because the Parthenon is not a temple like all the others. The Parthenon is the temple, is probably the most important buildings ever. So probably his purity and his entirety is something worth to be kept and to be restored. But as you can clearly understand, it's all about a choice that somebody did and took the responsibility of getting that. Luckily, we have, through the treatises and through all what we know about Greek way of the building, we know exactly how to reproduce the Parthenon. And at the end of the day, this is how the Parthenon used to appear at the beginning, 100 years ago, basically, not much more than that. 100 years ago, the Parthenon was empty, was with lots of columns missing, with the cell completely missing. And everything changes through the year. In fact, now they even decided to rebuild the Parthenon, even in the missing part, trying to reconstitute the entire original appearance of the Parthenon. Again, this is a choice. There are lots of architects, lots of colleagues of us thinking that this is too much, that they shouldn't rebuild completely everything because of romanticism, or because of some idea stratified through the century of a ruin. Instead, what we're going to have at the end of this process is a brand new Parthenon. Is it right? Is it wrong? Nobody knows. But at the end of the day, everything is recorded, and so everything could be got back to the situation before the collapsing. But at the end of the day, who said, if we want to choose one moment in which we decide the truth is, why the truth should be the ruin? If the original building was not a ruin, the original building was an entire temple. So why should we keep the ruin instead of obtaining the entire temple? Who said that the ruin that we found in the beginning of the last century is the right moment to be maintained, and not the one from the 5th century before Christ. Nobody knows about it. It's just one ideological concept that we decided to keep, not the truth. Here you can see some other elements, and you can already see some part of the Propylae app, for example, already restored. This is clear that this is old and this is new. We are pretty happy to have the missing part. Keeping all those considerations all together, let's go into analyze some projects. Maybe you already know some of them. The first one we're going to check is this musealization of San Jorge Castle in Lisbon, Portugal, from João Luís Carrillo de Graça. This intervention is 15 years old, mainly, and this was the situation of the archaeological area when Carrillo de Graça started to intervene. Here you can see the situation of the archaeological area was deeply bad, was not accessible by anyone, and even the covering to save the ruins were very somehow unacceptable. This is what we found. The first thing he did is a survey, and after completing a survey, he decided to create some models to start deciding how to intervene. What he discovered is that in this area, two main Islamic houses from the 11th century were present, alongside some elements from the Iron Age. This is the final effect of what he did as intervention. This effect is due to the fact that from one side, he decided to re-extrude the Islamic houses in their perfect and original volumetric looking, that is the white one, keeping the typological idea, so Islamic houses with a courtyard in the center, not having openings outside, but all the openings are converging into the center, but obviously not misunderstandable as a reconstruction. It's just a reproposal of the volumetric appearance. While for all the remainings from the Iron Age, he produced those metallic showcases encapsulating the elements from the Iron Age. So distinguishing the two different elements from two different periods, the Islamic houses from 11th century and the buildings from the Iron Ages, with different approaches. Here you can see the first thing he did was to define the boundary of the area. And he did it by those rusty metal elements that define the boundary. And also that give the idea that what was excavated is on a lower level. In fact, you can see here the difference of levels. Once you go down, you are inside the archaeological area. So the holy boundaries is the one to define the space, and one that tells the visitors when you are outside on or when you are inside. Secondly, he worked on the surfaces of the pavement, creating a smooth surfaces that could be accessible by lots of people, not having a dangerous situation. Then, as I told you, he tried to produce a building that was removable and reversible. In fact, that white buildings that you saw before actually are just surfaces in covered by plaster that are cartering a metallic structure. This metallic structure lean on only 6 pillars. So the elements inserting themselves into the archaeological soil are just 6. And this was to try not to waste the ruins as much as possible. At the end of the day, this building is very light, is disassemblable very easily. And once you want to get back to the situation of the ruin we had from the start, it's easy to bring back all the area to the original situation. This is the final situation. Everything seems to be light, everything fits completely the space, and everything works with light and the Mediterranean view. This is the building, and you can see it's not misunderstandable as a reconstruction. It is a new building, but the volumetric appearance is exactly the one of the original Arabian houses. And to emphasize this difference, he also decided to elevate the buildings over the level of the ruins, giving another element of discontinuity between old and new. Also inserting lights inside to let during the night to have this kind of situation somehow quite charming. We have another way to work that is what we call the independent structure. Those independent structures have more to do with interior architecture mainly. In fact, usually it insists on buildings still standing that change their function and mostly are used for becoming museum. This one is the musealization of Pilotta Palace in Parma, Italy, by Guido Canali. This intervention has been kept through different periods, as you can see. This is the building from the Farnese family from the 15th century. This, as you can see, is pretty in the middle of Parma. This is the river running through the center of the city. And the interior of this building already hosts an incredible intervention, that is this incredible wooden theater built in this very huge room during the 16th century. Guido Canali overlap inside this medieval castle, a Renaissance castle, his intervention and his independent structure that it was already completely defined to host the collection of this museum. And here you can see, even using quite poor elements, quite poor materials like the scaffolding, he decided to recreate a strange environment that filled the emptiness with a new kind of masses that at the same time also let the light come through, but a light that is reflected by the different elements. So recreating a new environment, a completely new environment that is not the original one, but bringing the attention of the visitors to what was on the top of them. So to that part of the building that usually are not appreciated that much. So the original mortar, the original bricks, the original walls of the castle, of the palace, are still there, restored and appreciable by the visitors. But the independent structure, the one that also is used for hanging the paintings, is over there creating a dialogue between the Renaissance palace and the intervention from 40 years ago. Here you can see how incredible this space is. Unfortunately, this room at the moment is not visitable any longer, but maybe something will get better. And here you can keep on looking at this intervention. You can keep on appreciating the idea of this new layer, completely independent to the original one, without any kind of need of retracing spaces. No, they're just interfering the spacing, giving a new meaning and a new layer to the space. Here you can see some other element. And to strengthen this idea, let me show you another intervention from Guido Canali, exactly with the same attitude. This time we are not in Parma any longer, but we are in Siena, Tuscany, and still Guido Canali intervening in this former hospital, an hospital from the 10th century before Christ, an hospital that has been built through centuries until and working until 50 years ago. So an hospital started in the 10th century after Christ and working until 50 years ago, then abandoned and turned into a museum. This is the entrance of the museum, and this is the Dome of Siena. The dome over here, and these are the layers. Guido Canali intervened on the underground levels of the building. Here you can see the complexity of the plan of the environments. And here you can see what he found when he entered this place. Bones, the schools, all the rest of the dead people in the ancient hospitals, and the situation completely messy. So he decided to create a brand new, completely independent structure, helpful to musealize all the rooms and galleries underneath the ground level. Here you can see the building site with all the system and all the implants needed to let the museum working. Here you can see the workers, the smiths and the plumbers. And here you can see the final effect of the building. Now, if you go there, you can visit all the spaces, all the collection, still appreciating the labyrinthic resemblance and aspect of the surrounding of the original building and the new layer with the collection exposed. Here you can see some of the showcases moving in the space, and there's still this new, let's call, pathway that is getting narrower or larger depending on which kind of room it faces. And here you can see how those showcases, those elements interfere with the spaces, giving a new point of view to the visitors. Look at the technological system and also the precision of all the elements. And all those elements hanging in the space, floating in the air, give a new perspective to what it would have been instead a normal vaulted environment. So now let's speak about continuity and discontinuity. This is a building in Murcia, another city in Spain. We are in the central square of the city, just beside the main cathedral. Through some excavation, they found some ancient ruins to be found underneath the level of the square. So after some decision, they produced a competition that was won by the Aman Canovas Maruri office that proposed an intervention kind of peculiar. In fact, they decided to consider the ruins as the piece of the collection in itself. And they decided to encapsulate those ruins into a urban scale showcase. What do I mean by that? Here you can see, this is the level of the street, of the square. This is the cathedral. This is the level of the ruins. And this is the new showcase encapsulating the ruins. From outside, again, everything is pretty clear and understandable as the new intervention, as a new showcases. Then when you enter, you find yourself inside the showcases, taking part in such a strange journey that is this trip through centuries. So lower you go, deeper you go, more ancient you go. A similar typology has been used by Ibanez architects for the musealization of the Arabes Bath of Baza in Spain. This is a little Arabic bath in the center of the city, almost completely covered by the raised level of the city that needed to be musealized and protected. So they decided to create a new covering encapsulating the original building. So outside you have this showcase, inside you have the original bath. So the light filtering through the new building and light the roof of the original bath. Here you can see even better. And obviously the new building hosts even pathways that helps the visitors to get closer to some part of the building that otherwise couldn't have been experienced. If you go lower, you get to the original level of the Arabic bath, and you still have the light coming from the same side because the new showcases respect completely the movement of light. At the end, the final effect is pretty amusing. Let's go about monumentalizing of the protection. This is a project that all of you probably know. And this has not to do with reconstruction. Despite this building, and we're talking about the Columba Museum in Köln by Peter Zumthor. When you get to the place, Peter Zumthor find a very complex situation. In fact, the spaces used to present some Paleo-Christianic cathedral on the lower level, a new church from the 14th century, and another modern church from the 70s of the last century in the middle. Peter Zumthor decided to keep all the ruins, included the ruins in the new building, that is a completely brand new building, nothing to do with reconstruction, nothing to do with the volumetric reproposal of the original buildings, not like the one in Lisbon that we saw, or not one like the one of the Theatre of Sagunto from Giorgio Grassi. Here, the extrusion of the elements have nothing to do with the original shape, the original volumetric resemblance of the original building from the 13th century. It's a brand new building, but keeping inside its walls the ruins of the different layers. When you enter inside, you can see the Paleo-Christianic church underneath, the 13th century walls, Gothic walls included in the new walls, and also the chapel from the 70s of the last century by Gottfried Bohm. Only some very thin and light pillars in the middle to keep the slabs standings. And here you can see how the interferences between the new and the old are strong in this building. Trust me, I visited this building lots of times, and the space inside, it's amazing. Another kind of monumentalization of the covering, maybe in this case even more evident, is the Bougon Burial Mounds Museum from Studio Milou at the end of the last millennium. Building is this one. And basically, here you can already see exactly the building. In the same way as we saw something else before, but in a very more gigantic scale, here you can see how the new building, the new museum, cover or encapsulate the ruins. So the collection here, the ruins, were effectively buildings. The new building is higher than the buildings and keeps everything together. And this new big glass showcase is not just a showcase, it's a museum that you can experience from the inside. You can see from outside, and in this section, everything is pretty clear. The new building is a glass building, keeping all the elements inside, apart from a church still working that is outside and has not a covering or a close boundary. Here you can see the plans, the section, and some views. Last approach we are having, because all of those approaches should be kept or should be chosen in your projects when you're going to attend Premio Piranesi. And one of the unmissable approach you should have to keep is the one with the landscape. Paesaggio is the Italian word for landscape. This is, again, a project in Spain with the musealization of a Roman theater in Clunia. And the project is by Lab Pape from Valladolid. And the project here has to do mainly with the landscape. Here you can see what the architects found when they've been asked to produce a musealization of the area. Not that much left. Everything invaded by ground, grass, vegetation, and so on. So something that could have even appeared like a rocky landscape, but a very organic situation. The presence of architecture, but not even architecture, even the presence of archaeology was very light and very transparent. So the project decided to include the naturalistic elements in itself. So the reproduction and the new readability of the original theater has been obtained by the use and the engaging of nature. So you can see that the higher part of the seats are just elements with the ground inside, and even the seats in the middle are still keeping the level of the vegetation, the level of the ground, as a reference element. Everything here seems to be linked, connected with nature and landscape in a very organic way. And you can see how this building fits the surrounding incredibly well. Even those walls that are supposed to keep the ground standing are not concrete walls or something not removable, but are those, we call it gabbiones, so stones encaged inside a metallic grid, just to emphasize this idea of naturalistic elements. All of them conveying to the landscape approach to the project in itself. So this is a theater. Now it works even as a theater, but somehow we can even call it a park more than not a building or not a museum. Do you remember the project from Giorgio Grassi of the theater in Sagunto? This is a Roman theater as well, but you can see how different the approach is here than not the one in Sagunto. And when some blocks are needed to define the spaces, all those blocks do not have mortar. They are just leaning over there and then they can be removed easily, or they just need to complete missing part for the safety of the ruins. But all the rest has to do with nature. Can you see those downhill stopped by those stones kept over there with those cages? And so the approach here is very light and very removable. Like the project of Tony Gironès in Cantaco, when visiting this area inside of a park, they found the rest of an ancient domus over here that needed to be musealized and mainly to be shown and to let it be understood, because if you go there, you don't recognize it as a real ruin and you don't understand anything about what in the past this building was. Because as I told you in the beginning, the point is in measuring the distance between what we have now and what it used to appear, this building in its entirety in the original times. How can we understand? What can we understand of this space looking at that? Those are just stones, nothing more than stones, and nothing is understandable. So the project was to redesign the boundaries, the levels, the layers, and the spaces of the original domus, but using a very, somehow, even industrial approach, exactly as the project before, engaging stones from the surroundings, maybe even stones that were already present in the archaeological place, to redefine the boundaries and the layers. This way, everything gets to be more understandable. And the spaces are now experienceable and walkable. Here you can see now how it appears. You can define the different rooms. And we also have an input of the possible height of the different elements with this wireframe that somehow now it is also a place when you can observe the context outside. This project is very fast, clear, somehow even elegant, and very cheap. But can you understand how different the place is now compared to how it was before the intervention of Tony Gironès? Look at that. As I told you, it was very, very cheap. All the intervention is just 162,000 euros. That is really very, very, very little money. It's 69 euro per square meter. That is nothing. Now, last part is how to draw during the Piranesi Award. We are not scared about anything, but we are very, we pay a lot of attention in some things. What we ask you to do is to have something that is measurable and understandable, something that can help us in appreciate the fact that you consider real dimension, real proportion, and not something that is photoshopped and misunderstood or deformed by the free possibility of those kind of softwares. Obviously, we are more than happy with freehand and manual drawing, as long as you are good in that. Anyway, you can use Premio Piranesi to train yourself in freehand and manual drawing. You can use it any kind of sketches you can produce, also with color. But mainly, as I told you, we love digital vector design. For the final presentation, having something that is measurable, that can be compared to the original situation is important to us. Your tutors will guide you, will help you in that, but we don't want strange drawings. Mainly, we love the orthogonal projection, plan, perspective, elevation, and section. We can have photo insertion, and possibly we would love something that can be inserted with a proper concept. That's why we want vectorial design. So you can produce your model and you can insert in a proper way inside a photograph. We mainly don't love 3D models with textures because, first of all, it took a lot of time, and during the Premio Piranesi, we don't have that much time. Second of all, to produce good photorealistic renders, you have to be great renderers. If you are not, stop before and produce 3D models that look like models, that look like mock-up. This will help you a lot. It doesn't take anything away from the quality of the project, but you won't create cheeky images. In the renderings, it's very important the involvement of the natural landscape. And the use of Photoshop is absolutely not recommended during the design process. Photoshop can be used, but afterwards the project has been done to qualify the final images, but not to produce the images. Those few rules that probably now are a bit confusing will be clearer during that period, but let me show you some idea. This is something we would love you to produce. Obviously, this is a very complex one with a lot of drawings, but if you can produce something like this, that would be lovely. This is the plan of the previous view. This view is the reconstruction of the Acropolis of Pergamon in Turkey. And this is the reproduction of the situation of the ruins nowadays. If you get closer, you can see this is only black on white with a different shade of light of black. And those kind of drawing is something that we love and something that could be reproduced even with just with AutoCAD. Those are the kind of drawings we love. Here you can see the shadows basically could be produced by ANSI 31H in AutoCAD. Those are the kind of drawings we love. The drawings of the tradition of the architectonic design. Here you can see some of them. Those are ancient drawings from 150 years ago. But all of those drawings can be reproduced with AutoCAD. Look at that one. Basically, it's the same thing, but produced in the late 90s of the last century by Enrique Miralles, probably with AutoCAD. But the idea of the drawings is just this one, black on white, using the edges and nothing less, nothing more. Look at the section, clear, understandable. And to show you what we mean, this is one of the drawings produced with AutoCAD by some students before you. You can do something like that very easily. And this is very clear to show the quality of a project. This is another building. This is a survey of the Colosseum, completely done by AutoCAD. And don't worry, we're going to give you lots of vectorial drawings already produced by us in the past, so you can use them as a starting point in which you have to design not the surrounding, but only your project. Those are the sketches I told you about that we love you to produce. Those sketches is the one that you have to keep or to produce while walking through the ruins, just as a starting point of the project. Sketches that interprets the surrounding. Very easy, very clear sketches, helping in the design process. Obviously, you have to be able, but even if you're not, you can use Premio Piranesi to train yourself and get better and better in this. Look at these. These ones are not even service. Those are just diagrams for the starting point of a project. And those are something that we really love too. And those are other projects. These are projects on the Acropolis you can clearly recognize. But starting from the design of the Parthenon, the new project is designed by AutoCAD. Nothing complex, nothing that you can't do. This is pretty clear. This is a project from 10 or more years ago. So just besides the Parthenon, he decided to create an excavation. I'm not talking about this project because it's too long to explain you, but talking about an excavation just underneath, keeping a part of the soil, but underneath the soil, creating a new museum. And those drawings are perfect. And the idea is similar to what the pensionaire from Prix de Rome decided to produce, the designing of the ruins, and we're going to give that. And then the project, the design of the ruins on the top, the repropositional project on the underneath part. Obviously, those are drawings from 200 years ago, but the point is exactly the same. In fact, this is a project from the first Premio Piranesi of the Greek theater, where adding to the ruins the new project, and everything here is designed in AutoCAD, and just the texture put it at the end to create the quality of the materials, but after the production of the project. Everything here is vectorial apart from the texture of the elements. And the project is completely clear, understandable, with the depth enough, without the need of any renders or 3D models. Obviously, 3D models for you now, it's easier. This project is from 203, so 21 years ago. Now, your capabilities and what the softwares give the chance to you, it's incredibly higher. So your skills is definitely better than this one. But those drawings from 21 years ago, from students like you, are exactly what we would love you to produce. Like other project in this is Sagunto, this is Berlin. Those are the drawings of the theater of Sagunto that I told you about before. And everything here is designed by lines on white board, and then the use of color, like in this case, the colors are proper colors, but you can do exactly the same with Photoshop. After the project is produced, you can color them. And then, if you are able, when I told you about the idea of a render without texture, this is what we think about. Those renders are perfect. Those renders are in Sicily. This is a project in Sicily. And this project presents all the characteristics of the architectonic project in itself, without being photorealistic, but just like presenting a model, a physical model, but without being physical, is a digital model without texture, but using the right colors. Obviously, you need to have a sensibility. And if you don't have sensibility enough, you can train your sensibility. That's why you're coming to Premio Piranesi, to train yourself and to get better. But those are the kind of views we would love you to produce. And those views are from 2004. So 20 years ago. Now you can do a lot better than this. But even if you can get to that with that sensibility, with that quality, that would be the great result for us. Readability is the most important one. And those are then what you can obtain at the end of the project. Do you remember this project I told you about? This project is understandable in orthogonal projection design, but at the end, it could be even represented to give the atmosphere this way to show what the designer had in his mind. So the section with the use of Photoshop look like this one, and this is very great. And this is the final view showing you which kind of quality inside the space the designer wanted to obtain, even with insertion of elements taken from ancient paintings that give just the input and the quality and the atmosphere. Well, the presentation is finished. So, do you have any question?
Yes, thank you first for your lecture. I wanted to ask you if you could propose to me any book of constructive details of this old and new intervention, especially since the focus of my thesis is more of contemporary interventions.
Honestly, I don't know any book presenting the constructive detail. Every project is a peculiar project for that situation. And so that you should buy a book from any project I showed you, showing you the details. And even in those cases, there are not that many because, you know, architects usually doesn't love to spend that much time in the technical detailings. Unfortunately, I can't help you that much. I can help you in the fact that when you're gonna come to Premio Piranesi, we're gonna try to interpret and to find a solution of any kind of situation. Obviously, your thesis, I don't know who is following you, but probably your tutors can help you. I don't know who your tutors are, but all of the project we spoke about had different solution. We're gonna give you some tutorials as well when we're gonna be there, but obviously any project has its own peculiarity. And unfortunately, as long as I know, no books presenting intervention on the ruins are sold to find all those solutions.
Okay, my second question is, what's your opinion of this industrial approach in Villa Adriana? Would it make sense because of his rich history? And do you think it would make sense to introduce something new in an industrial approach in Adrian Villa? It's one of those examples you showed on the last slides.
Personally, I don't think that Villa Adriana need an industrial approach because in Villa Adriana, there's already a lot. So an industrial layer maybe doesn't fit that much. The project I showed you, the one mainly from, don't remember the name at the moment, from, I'll tell you, just a minute. From Tony Gironès, the one in Cantaco. Maybe do you remember which project I'm talking about?
No, could you repeat it?
Yeah, I'll show you.
Okay.
This project.
Oh, okay, yeah.
This as an industrial approach. I love this project, but this project used to insist in such an area, not in Villa Adriana. If you look at the surrounding, you can see a lot of industrial buildings. In Villa Adriana, there's nothing industrial. Instead, the presence of archaeology is a lot much present than not here. So
The reason, I'm sorry for interrupting. The reason why I'm asking you this is because my thesis is more related to contemporary architecture, something that could be detached and attached, and maybe they will last for 1 week or 1 month. So it wouldn't make sense to do this approach of permanent structure or something like that. So this is why I'm asking. I'm trying to find a balance of what kind of material approaches should I be focused, since it's going to be more contemporary. So if it's not going to last long, could it be still valid?
I don't know, what do you mean by contemporary? Personally, I think that this project is incredibly contemporary,
Oh, yeah,
honestly.
yeah. No,
maybe too much.
In some sense that it's not going to last long. The opposite of permanent, something that is going to be removed.
Does this project look permanent? To me, it doesn't look permanent.
Yeah. Okay.
To me, this project is very reversible, very removable, easy removable.
Yeah. Okay.
But honestly, there are lots of ways to have this kind of possibility. I don't know exactly the topic of your thesis, and we should enter that a little bit more deeper.
Later.
Who are the tutors following you for the thesis?
Professor Cagliari and the assistant Sarah and Amat.
Okay, Amat, and who else?
Sarah, I forgot her surname.
Sarah Ghirardini. Okay.
Yeah.
So they can help you in that. But anyway,
okay.
If you want a better suggestion, we can speak about it during the Premio Piranesi. I'll be definitely happy to have a look. But I trust Sarah completely.
No, I just wanted to know your personal opinion, to be honest.
Yeah, I thank you a lot for your interest, but not knowing exactly the thesis and the project, I risk to say something that is incorrect and unrespectful for the what you did until now. So we can speak it with the project in front, and I can give you my opinion very likely. But in this way, everything I say could be wrong or misunderstood by me or by you. So it's better not to tell something if I don't know anything completely.
Yes, makes sense. Thank you. Also, another thing. Do you have? Can you send us some of vectorial drawings right now before Piranesi, or you can't, because we're now in the process of designing something, and those drawings would help us.
Can I send you vectorial drawings? Actually, as you probably assume, I'm not the one working on the drawings. I'm too old for that.
Yeah.
But
no, I'm just asking
you can ask that. You can ask that. Mainly, you can ask to Sarah, and we can arrange some things that can be sent to all of you.
Yeah. This is why. No, I'm not asking
because
I just wanted to use this time just to ask, like, do you think it could be better if you send us some of the drawing, maybe from last year, with some examples?
Ask Sarah, and this thing will be debated also because Sarah's husband is the one that have all the materials. We can arrange something and can send you a folder with some examples.
I think that would be great, since we have maybe 2 months or something, and we can start now just to start on designing something based on those drawings.
But if you start on designing something in Villa Adriana without your tutors, you can't present yourself. But maybe yes, you are producing your thesis, so maybe you can do something.
Just understanding more the context, like basically based on drawings more than the actual photos. So you could understand maybe the section or maybe the elevation. So whenever we are in Piranesi Prize, we would understand more on how to approach it. Or maybe the challenge of this Piranesi Prize is to not know anything about it, and the challenge is like a competition to start from that day. But
actually, the challenge is not to not know anything. The point is that we would like not to give something to someone and not to someone else. To give everybody the same possibilities. That is a problem of the policy also, because it's an award. So if someone lost and say, okay, but I didn't receive the material before, while the other guys had it, this is not that correct. But since you are producing your thesis, probably already have something, Villa Adriana. Anyway, don't worry about that. ask Sarah about that, and we will discuss it, because I will see Sarah's husband and even Professor Cagliari on Thursday, and maybe we can talk about it.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And
okay.
Yeah. It's okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Other question?
Oh yeah, one more thing. During Piranesi Prize, we need to design like 3 different things, like one based on water architecture, one like a pavilion, and something else. All right. And these 3 things that we are going to start to design during the Piranesi Prix de Rome are not going to be obligatory related to our thesis, right? Like we can use that material for our thesis later.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they need to be connected.
You are producing the thesis, but most of your colleagues are coming to Piranesi without having the thesis on Piranesi, so obviously they don't need necessarily to be connected with the thesis.
Cool. Okay.
Okay. Other question?
No, Professor. It was really nice.
Is okay?
Yes, it was really nice.
Just a minute. But I can stop recording, I guess.
Okay.
Let's go here. Interrompi registrazione. Ok, arresto.